Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sacred Feminine class for the Rose Wheel Mystery School. We're doing the Gemini Goddess Evening Star Ascent Journey, and we have made our way to the third eye chakra, which is the gate of perception, and that's the portal that was activated on October 9th at 2.5 degrees of Sagittarius. So this is our agenda for today. It's the same basic agenda that we go through with each class, although I will tell you that when we get to the portal closure for the gate of communication, we're going to do something a little different today. I'm kind of mixing it up because with this Mercury retrograde, I have been rethinking how I'm doing things in the classes. So that was one of the things that came to me, is how to redo the portal closure. So I hope you'll enjoy that. So we're going to go ahead and start off here with our grounding meditation. And fortunately, Leela is with us, so she can lead that for us.
Starting to notice your breath. Dropping down, down through the pelvis, down through the tailbone, down through the soles of the feet. Noticing as our breath slows. Each exhale, rooting down. Feeling the weight of the body dropping. Any thoughts, any heaviness, allowing that to fall away. Giving this down to the earth. Feeling our roots, like the roots of a tree, reaching down through the layers of the earth, down through the rock, the magma, the crystal, all the way down into the center of the earth. Just allowing ourselves to feel the spaciousness, this feeling of being supported, of being held. Remembering this connection that is always with us, that is always available. Just breathing this in. Feeling this reciprocity between ourselves and the energy of the earth. It's giving and receiving. Allowing ourselves to drink in this life force. Receiving it up through our bodies, up through the soles of our feet, up through our pelvis. Breathing it up, feeling as it fills up our bodies. Breathing it into our cells. Connecting back down again and feeling this circular flow, this rooting, this receiving, grounding back down, receiving again. Can we allow ourselves to receive all that is available to us, to remember this connection? Giving thanks for these physical bodies that allow us to be here, in this circle. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Leela. That was lovely.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and just establish our sacred space and our spiritual fortification. So I claim this space for the Sofia Christ consciousness. I call in Source, call in the cosmic Christ and the cosmic Sophia. I call in our higher selves and I call in our indwelling Christos Sophias. I call in Yeshua and Magdalene. I call in our mentorship councils and our galactic teams and our spirit allies. And I call in only those angels and archangels who are aligned with Source. And I ask the goddess Diana to put her full armor of spiritual protection and fortification upon us. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So interestingly enough, today, and for the first time ever, we are doing an invocation to the goddess Diana. And of course, we know she's a moon goddess. We see the moon here, the crescent moon on her forehead here, kind of like a little bit of a crown. And the sacred feminine activation always happens when Venus and the moon come together. And this one is happening in Sagittarius. And so we get the vision of the archer, and we know that Diana carries her bow and arrow with her. And she's often called the huntress, but I like to see her as the quester. So I was delighted to find this lovely invocation to her. And I just invite Maureen when she's ready to go ahead and do the invocation for us.
Diana, Queen of Night, in all your beauty bright, shine on us here, and with your silver beam unlock the gates of dream. Rise bright and clear on earth and sky and sea. Your magic mystery its spell shall cast, wherever leaf may grow, wherever tide may flow, till all be past. O secret Queen of power, at this enchanted hour, we ask your boon. May fortune's favor fall upon true witches all, O Lady Moon.
So this is obviously a pagan invocation. We could replace witches with priestesses or whatever feminine word you'd like to use.
Yeah, and Doreen Valiente, I believe she did the Charge of the Goddess, didn't she? I think she wrote that. The charge we take on as priestesses. I'm pretty sure she wrote that.
You have to look for it.
It's also good. Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. So here we are at the beginning, very beginning, where we always start with the monthly creative energies. And there's a lot going on this month. This may not be everything that's going on. This is what came into my awareness field at the time that I was putting this slide together. And what I really want to point out is, we started the month as a spillover from September 30th with the Mercury retrograde in Libra squaring Pluto. And we saw this last month, right before Mercury stationed retrograde at 25 Libra. Right before that, it had that square to Pluto at 24 Capricorn. So when it went up to 25 Libra and it stationed retrograde, then it came back over that 24th degree, which we see happened September 30th through the 2nd. And Maureen and I were actually talking about this in her personal session, because it so happens, and I'm going to do a little bit deeper dive into it, so happens that both she and I have our solar Pluto in that 24 degrees of Capricorn. So I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide or so. But it turns out that this square is being activated 3 times, once before Mercury stationed retrograde, once immediately after Mercury began its retrograde, and then it's going to square again on November 2nd. So this is a very, very powerful placement, because we see then on October 6th, that's where Pluto stationed direct. And that was the day that we had the new moon in Libra. And we see down here now that yesterday, the sun reached that 24 degree mark in Libra and also squared Pluto at 24 Capricorn. So, you know, what does this mean? It means for those of us who have Pluto, solar Pluto at this 24 degree Capricorn, those people now that are being born with their natal Pluto at 24 degree Capricorn, these are very potent activations that are going on to facilitate our evolutionary journey, personally with our solar Pluto, and also collectively for humanity. And so, you know, how is, for instance, yesterday, your personal transformation, your personal rebirth being fueled by these Libran energies of conscious equal partnership? How is your transformation in terms of how you're coming more into balance with your inner sacred feminine and your inner sacred masculine being birthed through you? So there's a lot of ways, of course, in which we can interpret these energies with Mercury. You know, what is it that the cosmic messenger is trying to share with you about what's happening with your own empowerment through this transformational process? So it's interesting that so much is happening with Pluto starting at the end of last month and going through this month and into the beginning of November. So I just wanted to bring that into our awareness. We see here that on October 16th, Mercury retrograde was opposite Chiron on that axis of conscious equal partnership. So what is the medicine about yourself, your love for yourself, that Mercury is sharing with you about how you're coming into balance with your self, capital S, and your lower self, lower s, and how that balance is able to be expressed through you in all of your other relationships. So there's a lot to discern there, that Mercury, while it's through its retrograde phase, is sharing these messages. And then tomorrow, both Jupiter and Mercury are going to be stationing direct. So Jupiter will be stationing direct at 22 degrees of Aquarius. 22 is that Magdalene number. And Mercury stationing direct at 10 degrees of Libra.
I think that's today. Today's the 18th.
Oh, for clarifying.
I was very aware of that. So I was like, did I get it wrong?
I'm focused on tomorrow. Because tomorrow is my son's birthday. So
Okay.
in my head, I'm already there. He's already turning 32. He's my one and only. So yes, today is October 18th. And yes, today Jupiter and Mercury are stationing direct. Thank you, Leila. Anytime I misspeak or my tongue gets tangled, please jump in and help me because, with my autism, that happens frequently. So that's, today, especially with Jupiter being a very large planet, so its energies are very expansive, very amplifying. Everybody should be feeling a huge shift in their energy level as Jupiter shifts its focus from our internal realm to the external realm. And so what boon, what gift did Jupiter through his retrograde journey reveal to you about yourself and will manifest now in this external environment as he's moving direct now? So pay attention to that wherever Aquarius is in your chart. You want to look there because that'll give you a clue as to what the boon may be for you. Jupiter always leaves gifts. So that's always an exciting thing to tap into. For me, Aquarius is in my 8th house. So of course it has to do with my power, my empowerment. And so how much more empowered will I feel? And how will that gift from Jupiter show up for me to reflect that back to me that I am standing in a more empowered place than I was before he started his retrograde journey in Pisces. And then the other thing I want to bring to our attention is that on Wednesday, when we have the full moon in Aries, I gotta put my glasses on because the writing's getting really teeny tiny. We're going to be hitting a significant milestone in our Gemini goddess journey because if you'll think back to over a year ago, the metamorphic seed point for the Gemini goddess occurred on June 3rd. And that metamorphic seed point happened at 14 degrees Gemini. And of course, across from the sky from Gemini is Sagittarius, where Venus is now. So just in 2 days, she is going to be crossing that opposition point to where the metamorphic seed occurred for the Gemini goddess journey. So Sagittarius, Gemini axis, that's the axis of the quest mate. Venus through Sagittarius is the quester, using her arrows and her bows to reach for the highest spiritual consciousness and the highest spiritual truth. And so be aware on Wednesday to see how that wisdom may show up for you in terms of how Venus as a questing partner, the sacred feminine as a questing partner, is revealing truths to you about the questing journey that we have already gone through since June. And the other thing I want to bring to your attention is, of course, right now we're in the Gemini Sagittarius eclipse journey. And so our final eclipse, which will be the 6th eclipse on this Gemini Sagittarius axis, is going to be on December 4th. with a total solar eclipse, and it's going to be at 12 degrees Sagittarius. So very much, again, closely conjunct within 2 degrees, that metamorphic point in its opposition. And so what illuminating information will you receive? What illuminating truth will you receive that is going to help you come back into alignment with whatever your own personal evolutionary journey is? This journey as the Gemini goddess is just one layer of our personal evolutionary journey. And just to remind you, which is an interesting factoid, you know, that metamorphic seed point for the Gemini goddess happened on June 3rd last year. But 2 days after that was the first eclipse on this Gemini Sagittarius axis. And it happened at 15.5 degrees. So also very close to that metamorphic seed point. So I think it's significant, and I think it's worth taking the time to raise our awareness heightening around the fact that the first eclipse on the Gemini Sagittarius axis and the final eclipse on the Gemini Sagittarius axis is happening right across the sky in Sagittarius from that metamorphic seed point. So if you to receive any wisdom around this play that's been going on, that I'm just now kind of tapping into as we prepare for Venus to cross that opposition point, I'd love for you to share it with us. So just want to bring into your awareness too, that at the end of the month on the 30th, we have Samhain, when Mars enters Scorpio, and the 31st is All Hallows Eve. Sun's entering Scorpio on the 23rd. So there's still a lot, even though our class is late in the month, there's still some big stuff coming between now and the end of the month. Now I want to come back up here for a minute and speak to this right here, October 9th. October 9th was a huge activation date for many reasons. First, 2 days before, Mars in the underworld had its resurrection point, its conjunction with the sun at 15 degrees Libra. And on that day, Venus entered Sagittarius. But what's fascinating is while the exact conjunction within that 15-degree point happened on the 7th, even through the 9th, Mars and the sun were still closely conjunct each other within the 16-degree point of Libra, within about 30 minutes or so, but still very closely conjunct, which is significant because this was the date of the activation for the gate of perception. And what happened just before that activation on the gate of perception, Venus was conjunct the South Node exactly within 1 minute before the portal activation. So its conjunction to the South Node is actually embedded in this gate of perception portal activation. And then the other thing that happened is that if you've listened to my introduction to the Cosmic Messenger class that I did on the Mercury synodic cycle, we discover that in that 40-day Mercury synodic cycle that happens 3 times a year, the most potent, most magical time is when Mercury has its inferior conjunction. And basically what that translates is while Mercury is in its retrograde phase, about halfway through that retrograde journey, it meets up with the sun. And so that it happened exactly at 17 degrees of Libra. And, you know, as I said, Mars continued, and actually that retrograde should not be there. Mars was direct. That's a typo. I'll have to fix that. Mars continued to be in a very close conjunction with the Mercury and Sun, within the same degree, just by minutes, not the exact point. So I wrote an entire blog piece called The Magic of Alchemy. This is the link for that, regarding these 3 significant activations that culminated on this same day of October 9th. And this blog post speaks to all of that. But more than that, it's even very significant for Maureen and myself. And that's because for me personally, my natal Venus is at almost 2 degrees Sagittarius, as is my natal Isis. And Maureen's natal Venus is almost at 3 degrees of Sagittarius. So we both had our natal Venus receive a huge attunement from this gate of perception portal activation, as I did also my natal Isis. So big day for us, Maureen. So I just want to give you an opportunity now to speak to anything that's coming up that was in your awareness on how that activation of the gate of perception was influencing your natal Venus, your inner sacred feminine.
I can't, nothing's coming up. You go ahead. What happened to you?
Okay. Well, and remember that the window for that activation is a month. And, you know, we're only 9 days past the activation point. And so tune into that and see what you may receive about that. I was tuning into it myself last night in terms of, you know, the third eye chakra. What is it that the sacred feminine is desiring me to see and know about my inner sacred feminine, about my inner Isis that I haven't recognized yet? And so that's one line of inquiry and contemplation. You may be guided to make a different line of inquiry and contemplation. But we've got this whole month, and as this month unfolds, you know, it may become more obvious to you.
Yeah, I as you were speaking, I was thinking that what's been coming up is a reminder of my vow to the Magdalene that I made in France. Yeah, I talked to you about that. You know, that I would, let's see, it was my eyes, my ears, and my mouth, or my voice, would be dedicated in her service. And so, yeah, that probably came up. And also because I had a Magdalene return. So I was definitely reminded of the vows I made to the divine feminine through Magdalene on that point where I was looking out over the temple, the land temple. It's huge. And we were just in a point where we could see all of it, all the different marks of the star, landmarks. And what's the name of the book that the book that he wrote about? What was his name? Lincoln?
Lincoln, is it Lincoln Abraham? It's Lincoln, Henry Lincoln. Okay, I don't know.
Henry Lincoln wrote a book. Yeah, about that discovery, that where the temple is in France, one of them anyway. And so there I made a vow to the Magdalene. So I guess that would be the strongest thing is really looking over how, and I think I've been doing that. I think my vow is pretty concrete, as I've been studying more about that. So yeah, that definitely is what happened there.
Yeah, and so just to kind of clarify a little bit, because you did kind of speak to it, but just to clarify for everybody that's been listening to you, what Maureen's referring to is a Magdalene trip that we took to France in September 2019. And this trip was centered around what's called a Venus landscape temple, meaning that there are 5 points of the pentagram that represents the sacred feminine, it built naturally into the landscape, and also other architecture built on those points that are like from point to point. We're talking like miles and miles. I mean, I don't even know how many miles.
It's huge.
It's
right.
huge. It's absolutely. So how they even recognize that is a mystery in and of itself.
It is.
One of the 5 points of the pentagram is where Rennes Chateau is, and where the Magdalene Tower was built by Bernier Saunier, who was the abbot that rebuilt the church there and dedicated it to the Magdalene. So we were actually standing there we had been up to the top of the Magdalene and had seen out to the horizons where the landscape temple was, but now we had come down to the foot of the tower, which was very close to the side of a cliff.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And we were each given the opportunity to step forward and to speak out across the landscape landscape temple, a vow to the Magdalene. Now, sadly, I wish I had written mine down because I don't remember what I said, but Maureen, as she said, does remember what she said. And what's so significant about it is you'll see on October 10th, Saturn stationed direct at 7 Aquarius. The very next day is when Maureen had her second activation of her Saturn opposition. And I think it's your third Saturn opposition, if I recall correctly. And also on that same day is when she had a Magdalene return. And her Magdalene return is in the heart of Scorpio, 14 degrees, in her first house. So coming back to this piece here, you were reminded of that vow. You've spoken to that vow to use your voice, your eyes and your ears in service to the Magdalene. And so if we kind of flip it over again, I think that one of the possibilities of what this gate of perception activation could be doing for your natal Venus is attuning your inner feminine into the ways in which the Magdalene is seeing through you, the ways in which the Magdalene is hearing through you, the ways in which the Magdalene is speaking through you. So I don't know if that's something that you've tapped into yet, and as a part of this vow that you made to be in service to her, but being aware of how that inner Magdalene is being used by the Magdalene, the ascended master Magdalene, the Magdalene archetype, who is an embodiment of the cosmic Sophia, how that is manifesting through you, through these physical perception and sensory perceptions.
Yeah, no, I'd have to think about that. Yeah.
So again, I mean, that just happened a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, while we're in this window, be aware of that and see what comes up for you around that.
Okay.
So a lot happening, a lot happening this month of October.
Yeah, it's very strong physically and emotionally in my experience with it. It's real powerful time, and I think the energies are coming to a head, that they're really coming to a point of strength, and then it will begin to integrate into the collective, and by the time we hit February 22nd, when the United States begins its Pluto return, we will hopefully have integrated enough of the light to help us to help others see, what it really means to look at our beginnings, and how that intent for our country has never really been realized, and now it's time for us to understand what that really meant. And I do think that those people had a download. It came from spirit, what the country was to represent. It was supposed to represent so many things to the world, and it's kind of been perverted, as so many things have. So I think we want to return to our original intent. And if we really read the Declaration of Independence, and see what was there in the hearts of those people, we can look past their personalities and understand the intent, the true intent of the country. It's beautiful. I really think it's beautiful.
It is very beautiful, and it's interesting that you just mentioned the Pluto return, because in a couple of slides I'm going to go over that again. But that natal Pluto point for the United States of America is in these last degrees of Capricorn, and one of the archetypes of Capricorn is the way shower. And so through this Pluto return that we're going to be experiencing in this country, how is our role as being the way shower for this planet being transformed and rebirth?
Yes. To be an example of the intent of this country, which I don't think we've done a very good job of so far. I was reading about, what other countries experienced in their Pluto returns, like France and France, it was the death of Napoleon, and in let's see, I can't remember England's. Anyway, you can read about all of the Pluto returns to the countries that are older than us, and it's all significant things that happened that changed the course of the country. And so I expect that to be exactly what happens to the United States.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I don't know when Canada was a country, when they became a country. What do you
1867.
1867? So 265 years from that point will be.
Yeah, we've still got, under 100 years to go.
Yeah, most of you won't see that.
I don't think I will.
Well, you might, but not as you are now. You
I
might.
feel like we're going to be impacted strong enough from the US being so close.
I think you are going to be impacted. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I was just like what you were talking about the Magdalene thing. I was just so curious because I know that it's not like super close, but my Magdalene's at 8 degrees, which is the closest thing I had to the activation. That's like the thing, yeah, the planet or something that's the closest to that. And then when you were speaking about you were speaking that Magdalene's in Scorpio, I was like, well, my Magdalene's in Sagittarius. That must mean that I'm going to be having a Magdalene return. So I just did some quick research because I do that. And mine's on the 20th of December, right? Like when we're moving into the metamorphic phase of Venus.
Wow, that is
I
fabulous.
know.
Yeah,
That
So
is
it feels exciting.
fantastic.
Feels really
that
profound, actually. I'm just like,
it
whoa.
is. It is. It is. It's just a huge dynamic point.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a Magdalene return. My Magdalene is in Virgo. I don't know how long ago it was, so that's something I'll look up if I can and send you ladies a text to let you know when my Magdalene return is. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of falls in with the work that we've been doing, and particularly in terms of the trip that Maureen and I took in 2019. So
Approximately 5.7 years between returns, because it's like 2,000 and something days that it takes
okay,
to orbit. Yeah.
that's good to know. That's really good to know.
Yes.
And maybe if you don't mind later, if you make a mental note, you can send us the link to where you found that
Yeah,
information.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Thank you.
The other thing, while we're talking about all of this and what's been going on in October, I don't know if either of you heard some people out there use the term Red October to describe this month regarding things that are happening on the global stage. But I'd like to kind of reappropriate that name, Red October, to represent the Magdalene and the sacred feminine, and how we are having this huge awareness heightening and activation within ourselves around our own sacred feminine and our own inner Magdalenes. And for those that don't understand that reappropriation, of course, it goes back to the blood mysteries of the sacred feminine. Is there anything either of you would like to talk to regarding that wisdom?
Yeah, I never really understood what Red October meant because I know there was that movie years ago, The Hunt for Red October, and I was like, I don't understand. But I love what you're speaking about, and that bringing it back into this deeper remembrance. I feel like that's just been such my path for a long time, but like lately just even deeper. And those blood mysteries and the ancient feminine wisdom, and like I've mentioned before, just restoring the feminine wisdom back on the planet, that's been hidden or lost, or just locked. I feel like, it's already within us, but it's been locked, and we're finding the keys to reopen it within ourselves. And it feels really essential for our humanity moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How about you, Maureen? Anything you want to share around that?
No, I was just wondering about the Red October thing. I was thinking that might be the Bolshevik Revolution was in October. I think that that's when communism started. Um, um, and the ruling party, the ruling king, czar, was deposed, murdered at that point. So I think that's what Red October originally stood for. It would be interesting, wouldn't it, to see that the astrology around that date. Yeah, must have been very big.
So moving on now, I want to get a little bit more into the topic that Maureen brought up, and it ties into what I was saying earlier on the previous screen about these activations that are happening with Pluto at this 24-degree Capricorn point. And so this is Pluto through the 24th degree in 2021. So from January 1st through January 25th, Pluto was moving through that 24th degree. And remember, every degree has 60 minutes. So with our birthdays being in the first part of January, she and I both have our solar Pluto in that 24 degree of Capricorn point. And then Pluto traveled through 25 degrees and 26 degrees, and then came back through and started moving through the 24th degree again back in August 12th, and will continue to move through that degree until November 28th. So I knew that Maureen and I had our solar Pluto within that 24th degree. So I wanted to see where Leela and Doreen have their solar Pluto. And what's interesting is for both Leela and Doreen, their solar Pluto is retrograde. Our solar Plutos, Maureen, are not retrograde. And that's significant because that's speaking to, this evolutionary journey that both of them have just recently stepped onto in the middle of this year, towards this inner transformation. Doreen's is also within that 24th degree. And look at how close hers is to yours and mine, Maureen. Mine's at the 25-minute, yours is at the 26-minute, hers is at the 24th minute. I find that fascinating. And of course, Leela, who tends to be our maverick, hers is at 26 degrees. And so you will have had that point activated some this year, but it's going to be activated more so throughout 2022, when Pluto is going to be moving back and forth over the 26 to 28 degree of Pluto. So that might be something that you might want to keep an eye on, because I think, no pun intended, it's very powerful. Of course, there is an exception. The first 2 days of January of next year, Pluto will be in the final minutes of 25 degrees. So, but this all came about, it came into my awareness on that October 9th day, when we had the sacred feminine activation, we had the Mercury inferior conjunction, that conjunction with the sun, that is the most powerful alchemical time for Mercury. And when Mars was still conjunct the sun and Mercury within the same degree. And so I had sent this text to Maureen on that day. And I said, Pluto has been sitting on our solar Pluto degree since August 12th. It crossed our exact solar Pluto placement on September 15th and 16th. When it's stationed direct on Thursday, because remember this was the 9th, which was a Saturday, so I was talking about October 6th. It was within 6 minutes of our exact solar Pluto placement. I mean, think about six minutes. That's a very, very narrow placement. I mean, like, you know, the width of a hair or something. So when Pluto stationed direct, it was really, really close to our exact solar Pluto placements. It will cross the exact Pluto placement on October 27th. So keep that in mind, Maureen, October 27th. And it's going to stay in that 24th degree until November 28th. And then I said, that is 3.5 months of being in the Pluto crucible. No wonder we've been feeling whipped. And I could not believe that I had not seen this before. But of course, with the gate of perception activation, all of a sudden, that became obvious to me. And because it became obvious to me, you know, within 2 days or 3 days of Pluto stationing direct, I was keenly aware that what had been going on through that time, what is continuing to go on through that time, for us that have our solar Pluto at 24 degrees. And so for anybody watching, if your birthday falls within these time periods when Pluto's been moving through that 24 degree point, that's where your solar Pluto will be. We're all being alchemized. We're all being alchemized in ways that we are going to be able to bring more wisdom to the planet, because we're talking about Capricorn energies here. And where we're all going to be able to stand more in our own sovereign power as sages, being that sovereign sage. So a huge event for us. And then of course that leads us to this Pluto return. Now what I didn't mention, and so let me just go back to this screen. What I forgot to speak to is that from October 6th through October 14th, it was the fall Navaratri. And for those that don't know what Navaratri is, it's 9 days of being in devotion to the goddess. And so why is that significant? Well, just turns out, and I'm telling you, you cannot make up these synchronicities. The first time that I discussed the Pluto return for the United States was in April, when we were having the spring Navaratri. And so we can see, of course, we're reappropriating Red October to bring it back to the feminine. This transformation is very much a part of what the sacred feminine is doing through us and on this planet. Do either of you want to speak to anything around that awareness heightening, that this Pluto return is intimately tied to the resurrection of the divine feminine on this planet, the emergence of Sofia through us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something I haven't correlated. I haven't correlated, you know, I feel like the resurrection is happening, so I haven't really put it on this Pluto thing and then this Pluto return, which I'm still, yeah, just listening to. I mean, there's so many different ways to see it, and I think that's the piece that's just allowing what it feels for me that that hasn't landed. You know, I can hear all the things of like, you know, what's happening on the external and all the different things, but I'm like, how does it feel for me? That kind of that big place of transformation. And yeah, maybe with my Pluto being aspected next year, there'll be more awareness as it moves through there. I feel like a big rebirth of the divine feminine is already like, it's here. I feel it in my cells, I feel it in my bones. I was just, you know, reflecting that on the gate. When we had the gate, I was actually in Vancouver visiting my 95-year-old grandmother, and it felt really powerful to be with my maternal lineage, you know, and the lineages of women that came before me, you know, and just connecting with her about her lineage and getting as much, you know, information and that ancestral connection. And that felt really connected to my third eye, you know, of like these the unseen ancestors and the unseen that come before me, but they're still a part of who I am. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it just felt really, really significant, you know, in my own journey, and something that I've been longing for.
And to be with your own family's elder, because
Yeah.
again, with the Capricorn energies, we are tapping in to the elders of the tribe. And for
Yes.
most of us, our tribe is our family origin, our family lineage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful reminder. I was like, there's never any coincidences, you know, it was just beautifully aligned that that was the day that I had to go and see her. And I actually didn't even remember that that was like, I knew it was the day leading up to it, but I think on the day I didn't realize that that was the day. And so it's just so powerful to be there with her. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Maureen? Anything coming up around that?
Well, not personally, but again, with the country, and I can't remember if it was the Declaration. I don't think so. I think it was the Constitution. When the Constitution was written, it was based on or took a lot of the was it the Iroquois tribe, their own set of guidance for their nation. I think it was the Iroquois, but they had in their tribal guidance a very secure place for the grandmothers, the elders, the women. And when our Constitution was written, that was left out. So they did not in any way give way to the divine feminine, to the grandmothers, to the women's contribution. It's not in there. So I think that when we see this happening, you know, next year, we're going to see that come back, and that definitely goes along with the astrology. That overlooking that part was a pretty big mistake.
It was a huge mistake. And thank
Yeah.
you for speaking to that. I know several years ago, I wrote a whole lot around that, but that's absolutely right, that the entire way that our government is structured is based on that model, and that they chose to leave that piece out, and that they were advised strongly not to do that.
Yeah, not do. It was important to include that, but they chose not to.
Right. And so isn't it interesting that the metamorphic seed point for the sacred feminine, which is happening 2 hours after my birth time on my birthday, January 8th, is the metamorphosis from the Gemini goddess to the Capricorn goddess. Isn't it interesting that we're going to be having this Capricorn goddess journey during this entire year of these Pluto return activations?
It is. It's amazing that that's the goddess that we will be working with, the grandmother.
Again, you cannot make up these synchronicities. There's something there. And I love how you've tapped into this piece that may be a part of how the United States will be transforming as a way shower, is by bringing in that critical piece of the feminine that it chose to leave out all those hundreds of years ago.
Yes, absolutely. It's incredible. And I always think, I was born in Massachusetts, very close to Concord, where my first home was. And I've always felt a connection to the beginning of our country. It's just so very strong in me. And I think that walking the land I did, that's where I learned to walk. And right behind my home was the oldest graveyard in Concord. And it had many people that had fought for independence. And I just ran on that ground, and that ground had big codes. And I really believe that I was connected to that through the land.
Yeah.
And
well, with your Mercury and Capricorn, no doubt about it.
yeah.
No doubt about it. Wow. Incredible. So what we see here, just to remind everybody, because I did go over this in April, that the United States Pluto is located at 27 degrees Capricorn 33, and it was retrograde. Pluto was retrograde at the time. Now we've been going through a Pluto vision quest, right? Remember, whenever a planet is in retrograde motion, I refer to that as a vision quest. We've been going through a Pluto vision quest this year from April 27th, and that will complete on January 27th. This is after the Capricorn goddess, I believe, rises. I'll have to double check that. But we'll also be going through another Pluto vision quest next year while we're having the 3 activations of the Pluto return. So from June 1st through October 9th next year. So the 3 activations of, this should say 2022, apologize for that typo. The 3 activations for the Pluto return in 2022 are going to be February 21st, and Maureen did speak to that first activation, July 12th, and then December 28th. Now, I know I've said this before and it bears repeating. Whenever you have numerous activations of a transformational, what I call rite of passage, like I'm having this year 3 activations of my Saturn return. Some people will have, let's say, 3 activations of a Chiron return. Whenever you're having 3 activations of that, this is the energetic effect that I attribute to that. So with the first activation, basically what you're doing is you're creating the frame of the foundation. So if you think about building a house, you know, the first thing they do is they put down those 2x4s to kind of map out exactly what the footprint of that house is going to sit on. So that's the first activation. The second activation, right? You back up the cement truck, and you pour in the cement into that frame that has been laid out, and you level the concrete into the foundation that's been framed out. That's the second activation, the energetic effect that's going on. And then in the third activation, that cement that's been laid for the foundation of the house is dried, it's hard, it's solid, it's stable, and you can walk on it and you can build the house from there. And that's what happens at this third activation. And this is significant to understand because that takes us to the very end of next year. Now, what will happen is Pluto will retrograde between Aquarius and Capricorn for a while. So we're going to be remaining under the influence of this Pluto return and its energies as Pluto moves into and stays into Aquarius at the end of 2024. So, you know, that's a 2-year period. And we're not even going to be able to feel like we're coming out of the shadow of that Pluto return until 2025, and even more so in 2026, once Pluto has finally moved into Aquarius and starts moving away from those early degrees of Aquarius, which are still closely conjunct that 27.5 degree of Capricorn. So this is not a quick transformation. This is being in the cauldron, as I call it, and being cooked until, you know, the meat falls off the bones, right? You can't do that in an hour. How many hours does it take to cook something until the meat falls off the bones? And this is what we're seeing at the effect of these energies, that even though those activations are happening next year, we still have a couple of more years of dealing with this. So it'll be interesting by 2025 and 2026 to see if and how that feminine piece is brought back into the way that the government of the United States will be structured at that point. Because Pluto is in Capricorn is all about dismantling the structures that no longer serve our expansion. So in Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius is going to enable us to have radical, liberating, new ways of empowering ourselves. And with Saturn in Aquarius, building those kinds of new structures. Is there anything that's coming up around that process, that alchemical process that's going to be happening over these, 3, almost 4 years still?
No.
And so think about what I said. For Maureen and I, our solar Pluto was at 24 degrees. That's where it was on our birthdays. But next year, January, when we have our birthdays, they're going to be at the 26th degree, where Leela's is, very much closer to that 27.5 degree return point. So we are all being catalyzed by this Pluto return for this nation, as our solar Plutos, whenever we have our birthdays, are being positioned closer and closer to that return point. So this isn't something that's just happening on a global level or a national level. This is very individual. This is very personal. And what happens for us personally is what's going to show up nationally and globally.
Hmm.
Anything coming up around that? Okay, let's move on. So here we are. Let's go. Oops, sorry, got ahead of myself. 4 planets stationing direct this month. Pluto stationed direct on the 6th. Saturn stationed direct on the 10th, the day before Maureen's final activation of her Saturn opposition and her Magdalene return. And today, as Leela so kindly reminded us, Mercury and Jupiter stationing direct. This is huge. So we're not going to have another planet station direct until December. That's when Neptune will station direct. Now we've talked a bit about this upcoming Venus goddess journey, when we're having that metamorphic point where the Gemini goddess becomes the Capricorn goddess. And as I said earlier, that's happening on my birthday. And the metamorphic point for the Capricorn meta goddess is going to be at 18 degrees Capricorn, 43 minutes. And that is happening about 2 hours after my birth time. And so that metamorphic point is happening less than 1 degree away from my sun. So while the exact metamorphic point won't be reflected in my solar return chart because it's going to be happening 2 hours later, it's close enough, right? Less than 1 degree that it's definitely being encoded in my solar return chart for next year. And for Maureen, whose birthday is the day after, it's going to be encoded in your solar return chart too. And so for both of us who have, our sun in Capricorn, this journey of the Capricorn meta goddess is going to be huge for us. Even more so for Maureen, because her sacred masculine is in Capricorn conjunct her sun, and her Mercury, the cosmic messenger, also in Capricorn. This is going to be big for us, two sages and elders that we are, being way showers through this journey. So here I put Venus rises as the Capricorn meta goddess on January 14th.
And when does she enter the metamorphic phase? What's the day? Is it the 8th?
No,
The 20th.
that's the seed point.
Okay. When does she enter?
She enters the metamorphic underworld. Leela's saying the 20th. For some reason, I've got the 19th here.
Maybe it's the 19th. I think you're right. I was
Okay.
just, yeah, the 19th. I do have that.
Okay.
The 19th of December. And look at where it is. It's a minute and a few, it's a degree and a few minutes from that Pluto return point. Entering the metamorphic underworld at 26:29. The Pluto return point is 27:33. So again, speaking to how the sacred feminine is such an integral part of the metamorphosis that our country is going through with this Pluto return next year. Thank you for asking that question, Maureen. All right, so now we're going to do the closure on the gate of communication, the throat chakra, and we're doing it a little bit differently to kind of encourage more engagement. So just to remind everybody, because it's been a while since you've had your personal sessions and we've had the class and we've looked at the information. The big activation, obviously there were other aspects, but the big activation for the gate of communication was the Moon Venus Magdalene conjunction, and they were in conjunct Sedna retrograde. And we know that at the throat chakra, we have access to Satya consciousness, which is truth in speech. So the question is, how was the sacred feminine? How was the Magdalene? How is Sedna as the sacred feminine? How were these sacred feminine energies revealing to us the truth about our voice? Now, for Maureen and I, this activation, this gate activation, was activating our solar Magdalenes and our solar Sednas, obviously in different houses. Maureen's solar Magdalene was in her first house, mine was in my third house. Maureen's solar Sedna is in her 8th house, mine is in my 10th house. But it was also activating Maureen's natal Chiron in her first house and also activating my natal Ischian in my 4th house. So just to kind of use me as an example for the two of you, I'm going to go first. Notice here for Leela, it was activating her natal Uranus retrograde in her 4th house, also her solar Sedna. All of us, because Sedna moves so long, moves so slow, all of us will have had our solar Sednas activated by this placement. So for me, I'm going to focus in on the Ischian piece. What if you don't remember what Ischian represents, it can represent two things. It can represent the unforgivable sin or the unforgivable wound that becomes transmuted into the sacred gift, or it can represent the wounded child that becomes transmuted into the divine child. And for me, because my natal Ischian is here in my 4th house, I relate to it as the wounded child aspect that's being transmuted to the divine child. So the limiting belief that became apparent to me, which is definitely an inner child wound, was that no one wants to listen to me. But what happened through this process is that I discovered the truth about my voice is that what I have to say is valuable and it's important for people to hear. And so I can see here that the solar Magdalene and the solar Sedna were very much involved with that, because the solar Sedna Magdalene in my 3rd house has to do with my local community. So what is my local community? My local community is the people that I reach through these classes, through the Roseville Mystery School, through the Golden Ray Center, the people that are on my mailing list. That's my local community. My solar Sedna being in the 10th house of the work that I'm known for also played a role in me recognizing that what I have to say is valuable and important for people to hear, because that's what I share in my work through these classes, through the Roseville Mystery School, through the Golden Ray Center. So you can really see the influence of that activation for me at this gate. Now, when we were doing Maureen's personal session, she shared that her limiting belief is when she speaks, it's as if she's muffled to all, including herself. And isn't it interesting, she said, including myself, because her solar Magdalene and her natal Chiron are in the first house, the house of the self. And then the truth that was revealed to her about her voice is her voice is clear, strong, and confident. Well, no doubt, solar Sedna in her eighth house of her power, has to do with her recognizing that her voice is clear, strong, and confident. So before we move on to Leela, Maureen, now that you're seeing this through a whole new lens, and of course we discussed this a lot in your personal session, is there anything new around this piece that is coming into your awareness that's desiring to be shared?
I think it's important to understand where my Chiron is, for one thing.
Thank you.
And
So there's
go ahead.
medicine there, right? Medicine.
Oh boy, big time. Yeah.
that you
And I've not
receive.
been able to forget that because my sciatica acted up. And so from the hip all the way down to my ankle, I have pain. And if you remember Chiron Miss, he is the wounded one.
Yes.
He is the wounded warrior. He can't heal himself.
Right, the wounded
And
healer.
he is a healer.
Yeah.
Right. So my Chiron has definitely shown me, where all of that is going on and what my focus. Am I wounded? Well, I'm having pain. Chiron definitely had pain. So that medicine is coming full center right now. And he's Scorpion. My Chiron is Scorpio. And
Scorpio,
so,
yeah.
yeah. And so I've been looking at this. Well, I hadn't been looking at this until now that was manifesting for me as a pain on my right side. I'm not sure where he was wounded, but it was definitely in that area of his body. And
So if I may pause you right there, because you said on my right side. So there's a clue that it has something to do with your inner masculine. Right side is inner masculine, left side is inner feminine. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, so so while I've been focusing on this pain, I hadn't really been thinking about my Chiron being activated by anything. And Sedna in the 8th house, that's also ruled by Scorpio. So this is a very shamanic thing for me. And where that's going to go, I'm not real sure. I just know that the physical manifestation, the pain from the sciatic nerve, is definitely it's showing me, what is being activated in my chart. That happens sometimes, but not a lot for me.
Yeah.
And Chiron would be the one. And I've studied Chiron and his myth and the sacrifice, because he sacrificed himself for Prometheus, and he was recognized for that sacrifice. But it's a new way of looking at sacrifice now, and I'm reminded of that. So
yeah.
So that's where I am right now with
Yeah.
that.
So let me just remind you too, and for those that won't be aware, that the shamanic medicine of Chiron in Scorpio is, how do I surrender to deep and profound shamanic transformation in order to claim my power? So the medicine has to do with fearlessness, with vulnerability, to be able to go deep. And you go deep, you know that. But what's happening is you're being invited, might be kind of a soft word. It might feel like you're being demanded or being pushed to go deeper than you've ever gone before. And this pain with your sciatica starting here in your hip, if you know anything about Louise Hay, she talks about hip pain being about our resistance to moving forward.
Yeah, okay.
So if you want to tie that back to the medicine of Chiron and Scorpio, the resistance to go even deeper, the resistance to be even more vulnerable and more fearless. And of course, this relates to your voice.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So that's huge processing around this gate. And why we call it closure, we know that these gates are not written in stone. The boundaries, the windows of these gates are not written in stone. They often overlap each other.
Yeah.
So this is a huge awareness heightening piece that you've had even since your personal session that's going to need time to integrate. And as it does, there'll be more ahas around it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And so for Leela now, you know, activating your natal Uranus retrograde. She's recently completed a Uranus opposition, right? Did I get that right? I'm doing this from, when I do it from memory, I always second guess myself because my memory's like a sieve.
I completed in 2020 my Uranus opposition.
2020.
Yeah.
So activating your natal Uranus retrograde, again, that inner liberation and that inner awakening that happens. And of course, her solar Sedna in the 11th house. Now let's talk about the 11th house. What this means is that everything that she's doing for herself within this space of 4th house, the home, going to see your grandmother, right, on the day of this activation, tapping into that lineage, 4th house stuff. How was that liberating for you within? And when it's liberating with her within, with solar Sedna in her 11th house, then it's also creating that liberation within the collective consciousness of humanity to be able to embody, for the collective to be able to embody, because Sedna is in Taurus, and Taurus is all about embodying energies. So regarding this throat activation, being with your grandmother at the gate of perception activation, were there things that you were able to say that maybe you hadn't said before? Were there things that she was saying that's given you permission to be able to speak to that you hadn't allowed yourself to speak to before? These are just some ideas. How did you experience that?
I feel that, you know, there's only so much time, so there's no like barriers to going as deep as possible. And a lot of it's like just around being part of keeping the stories and the lineage of my ancestors alive through knowing where they come from and, you know, a little bit more information. I feel like that's really important. And that a lot of like these, I don't know, it seems like there's a lot's being lost through the younger generations, you know, including people from my generation. So it feels really important, you know, as these older generations leave the planet, you know, like, and I think being from a country that I'm not, you know, I'm born here, but I'm not, you know, that's not where my lineage is. It's like knowing where these points in the earth are as well is very, it just feels like it's been important to me, but it's becoming more and more important to just to know, even though I know like there's the gnosis, but like to have the information feels really important. And I mean, strangely enough, like my grandma said, she's like, you're the only one that ever asked me about this out of all the grandchildren, even in her children, you know? And so yeah, for me there that's like it feels really important and kind of like what I'd spoken to before, especially in these like maternal lineages. Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge. And I love how you speak to the fact that your lineage isn't Canadian. Your lineage emigrated to Canada, but they come from someplace else in the world, as does my own, you know. And as you're talking about that, I'm reminded of, you know, these DNA tests that you can get done now through Ancestry or 23andMe, and there's several others. And, you know, my mom is Sicilian. Her last name is Catalona. That's Sicilian. And she was raised Sicilian. In fact, you know, she was 18 before she found out that her own mother was actually German and Irish. Because when my grandmother married my grandfather, she totally acclimated to the Sicilian culture. And she learned to speak Sicilian. And my great-grandmother, my Sicilian great-grandmother, taught her how to cook. And that's the food that we were raised on. And then that came down to me, you know, we were raised in a Sicilian household where we very much identified with our Sicilian lineage. And then I took my Ancestry DNA test. And I had an identity crisis. Because like only 10% of my whole DNA comes from my Sicilian heritage. My predominant DNA is from Scotland. Wow. I don't know anything about the Scottish culture or the Scottish people or Scottish food. I mean, we were raised on food. So these things tie in to the things that you're exploring when people are going and delving into their lineage.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that we can, even if it's like such a small part of our actual ancestry, it's still culturally the biggest part of what we experience. And it's like the same when because my dad was adopted, so there's like a lot of unknown in his side, and we know a little bit, but it's still this place where I feel like a deep connection also to my soul lineage, and I've kind of leaned on that a lot in my life of just like where do I feel the most connected to, and you know, through my priestess lineage and what I feel connected to. And now there feels like there's just these pieces of and it's not that I have to know everything, but it's like there's like a deep curiosity, you know, of where did they come from. And yeah, like my grandma's parents immigrated from Austria. And I mean, Austria was in the center of so many empires. So you know, who were the Austrian people? They might have been Hungarian. They might have been, you know, many different like cultures even in there. And yeah, so it's just really interesting. And
it is fascinating when you get your DNA and your lineage, and of course if your father is still alive, I don't know if he is or not, but no. Okay.
No.
Well, mine isn't either. And so there's no way I can get that male lineage. My son could give me some, but he's reluctant to do the DNA tests, and I'm not going to force the issue. But I have, other than the research I've done on ancestry.com, I have no idea what the male lineage line is. I assume it's German Irish. That's where the parents came from, his parents. So, but I don't know, it could be something entirely different. My grandmother came from Ireland, but my great grandmother, but she might have more Scandinavian DNA, because the Vikings were there. So it's really hard to know everything. You can't. So, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. But these cultural influences in terms of what we're raised with
That's
in our lineage
yeah.
are
No,
just
I was
as
raised
powerful as the
American.
actual codes in our DNA.
I think that has a lot to do with it. I wasn't raised in any particular culture, just American, baby boomers. We won a war and we had families. That's pretty much it, for us. But I would love to know, I wish my great grandmother, I could have talked to her and, learned more about what she knew of her family. But by the time you finally think of these things, a lot of them are gone,
Well, and
I'm
I'll
glad
tell you
you had an opportunity, Leila, to talk to you.
yes. The other piece is what you learn in high school genetics with the big B, little b, and so you get a big B, a big B, little b, a little b, little b. That stuff is baloney.
The recessive?
Because let me tell you, I have two siblings and my brother has almost 25% of the Sicilian DNA, which is, I expected I would have at least 25% of the DNA. My sister, I think she has even less of the Sicilian DNA than I do, and mine's a small part. So this whole thing about, 25%, 25% is baloney, because you don't know how those DNA codes are going to show up, even amongst siblings. It's crazy. So it's fascinating to me that, you had this experience with this elder, and it makes me wonder, were you aware of the Magdalene within her as an elder, speaking to the Magdalene within you as a part of that Magdalene lineage?
I don't think I was connected to that when we were speaking. But I'm just trying to tune into that connection with her. My grandmother and I have a special connection. I'm the first grandchild, and I'm my mom's first child. So my grandma had my mom as her first child, and she's a girl, and then obviously my mom had me, and I'm a girl, and we're all 25 years apart. So there's been this kind of special sort of connection between the three of us as well. So yeah, my grandma and I are both Cancerians, so we've always had a couple different things being special, just being the first grandchild and just our bond and just that we share this, our birthdays are close. So yeah, there's always been this depth between us, this shared love, um, that I don't know is the same. Like my sister's always like, she's like, "You're grandma's favorite," and I was like, I don't know about that, but I don't know. It's like there's a special connection, and whether that's from another lifetime or who knows, like a soul's journey
Right.
or yeah, yeah.
Right. So I just invite you to kind of do a little contemplation around that. And because of the day, especially
Hmm.
that you were there with that activation going on, and maybe the Magdalene within you will allow you to perceive how she was speaking to you from your
Hmm.
grandmother. It's just
Hmm.
something that you
Yeah.
play with.
I just think it's just so baffling. I've been like of all the regulations and everything that's been happening in the world, and the regulations were changing again, and I had like this like really small window to go there before they changed everything, and it's just I just find it so powerful that it aligned, like you know, it's like I can't even plan it. It's just
I'm telling you, these synchronicities, you cannot
yeah.
make it up. It happens exactly when it's supposed to happen for the most potent effect.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you both for sharing all of that around this closure piece. And I just really feel like having done it this way differently, that there was significantly more engagement with this closure, and it feels like a deeper, more authentic closure. I don't know if the two of you felt that as well, but I'd be interested in your feedback on that. So this next piece goes back to this article that I mentioned to both of you, Mary Magdalene, Dark Goddess, Female Christ by Megan Rose Woollever. And in this article, she talks about the embodiment of the Magdalene archetype and what that looks like, feels like. And so these are the three big pieces that I took out that are also tied to this closure piece because of the fact that the Magdalene was such a part of that activation. And also, again, for Maureen, because she's had her Magdalene return. Now, Leela, you're getting ready to have your Magdalene return. This information will be valuable to you. You can tap into this. So as we embody this Magdalene archetype, these energies of our inner Magdalene allow us to be a powerful agent of transformational change for ourselves, our beloveds, and our community. It also allows us to devote ourselves to embodying our divine nature in service to awakening the Christos Sophia in all beings. And I love this about the embodiment piece because that to me speaks to the role Sedna was playing for the Magdalene in that inconjunct, that I can be a human incarnation and I am also an embodiment of the divine, and that I can be an agent to help others awaken to their own inner divinity. I just happen to call that the indwelling Christos Sophia. Whatever anybody else calls it is fine. Also, this embodiment of the Magdalene archetype helps us to support people in becoming more fully aligned with their higher self so that they may serve the planet through transformation of their own self, of their relationships, and of their community. So when people that are doing Magdalene work when people are involved in priestess circles that are a part of the Magdalene lineage, you know, we talk a lot about the Magdalene in terms of who she was when she was here on the planet and her role with Yeshua, but we don't really spend a lot of time talking about ourselves as an embodiment of the Magdalene. And remember, the Magdalene is a title, right? And it's also, remember that the Magdalene in Hebrew meant tower of flock. And so as Magdalene priestesses, as embodiments of the Magdalene, we are assisting a flock, a community, a tribe. So is there anything around that embodiment piece that maybe you have a different understanding of now, or maybe you've been experiencing showing up through you that you'd like to speak to?
Yeah, I feel like she's been so with me this whole journey. Actually, like through the whole Gemini goddess journey, she's been so strong. And particularly during this evening star phase, she's, you know, there's like because we're going through this ascent journey, I really feel like the rising, you know, the rising of that divine feminine, like, you know, moving into that yeah, just that fullness, that full radiance. And I mean, so often in our personal sessions, there's been aspects, you know, she's really played a role in my own journey. And so I'm just really feeling a deep alignment and a deep like allyship with her.
Yes.
And reminding me of my own wisdom, reminding me of my own path, reminding me of my own leadership, of staying in my heart and walking the way of love, and that there's not anything that I have to do, because it's like the essence of my being,
Yeah.
and to trust in that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Mhm.
Absolutely beautiful. And you know, one of the pieces, and it's probably because of my Scorpio goddess overtone, that I love about what Megan Rose Woolover shares is she aligns this Magdalene archetype with the dark goddess energies. And I think that this is the first time actually that I've heard anybody align the Magdalene archetype with the dark goddess. And if anybody knows anything about that, it's going to be you, Maureen, because you've got your natal Magdalene in Scorpio. And so how does that piece feel for you?
Yeah. I've always been, you know, studied the dark goddess. I've been drawn to the Black Madonna for as long as, you know, when we were in France again, they were saying this is where the Black Madonna is. I'm going, where is the Black Madonna? I want to see it. You know, I don't want to get out of here without seeing it. And I did see it, and it was beautiful. And the story of La Negrita, which is a Mexican story about a Black Madonna. It's a beautiful story. I told my granddaughter, and she loved it and asked me to repeat it often. So what I'm feeling now is I'm coming full circle. This is a full circle moment. In 2009, I went to Egypt, and that kicked off a whole new world for me. And the goddess that did that was Sekhmet. And now, started on October the 16th, is a huge Egyptian exhibit at our museum in Oregon. And they have got statues of Sekhmet. It's called Nefertari's Egypt. She was the wife of Ramses II. I know very little about her, but obviously there's a great deal of segment in her world. So I am going to that exhibit and see what new things come to me from this beautiful goddess. And although she is a sun goddess, she has a very dark side, and I've appreciate that about her. And so I'm feeling full circle right now.
And it aligns with your Magdalene return.
Yeah, it absolutely does, because that was what kicked off the entire path. I came back and I immediately hooked up classes with Lisa, which is our priestess lineage. So that all happened through the Temple of Sekhmet. And Isis also. But that was a very gentle energy, whereas Sekhmet wasn't. And so, yeah, this is an amazing realization, and I'm excited to go to this exhibit. Just so thrilled that it started on the 16th and it goes through January 16th. So I'm going to get to see some more
That's
real
exciting.
Egyptian things. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thrilled for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think I've mentioned before that I too have quite an affinity for Sekhmet, because she's very closely within less than 1 degree conjunct my sun.
Oh, wow. She's just so powerful, and she is never been apart from this priestess movement, from this movement back to the divine feminine. She is so much a part of that. She's been very, very strong. When we first started working with the Venus cycle, it was always Sekhmet who was the meta goddess. I mean, she was just the one we worked with. And when I'm needing to understand fierceness, she's the one I look to.
Yeah.
She's the lioness. She appeared to me in the full moon. I mean,
Yes.
it's just, I'm so excited to be able to see her again.
That's fantastic. And to bring that full circle back around to the Magdalene as a dark goddess, we have to remember, and of course they don't talk about this a lot, that Mary Magdalene was, initiated through the mystery schools in Egypt. So I am
yeah. And the Essenes were there too, and I had guidance to study them more, and I haven't been able to do that. I've got to do that now. It's time. So I'm being reminded of all of this right now.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing all of that. So where does that bring us? It brings us to this journey. Here we are now. We have risen all the way up here to this third eye, which gives us access to the sun aspect of the Christ, which gives us aspect to the divine gift of Shanti consciousness. Shanti being the Sanskrit word for peace, and experiencing that consciousness as love in thought. So this is, really, really very powerful. I'm having a hard time with my mouse here, just a second. Okay. So let's talk about this third eye gate of perception portal that was activated on the 9th. So a balanced third eye can result in experiencing visions of things with prophetic and intuitive dreams. It can result in becoming sensitive or even more sensitive to subtle energies and vibrations of people and things. It gives us easy access to wisdom. And it can result in our soul opening up to receive messages. They're saying here from eternity, I would say from the unified source field. So these are the things that we are being at this activation calibrated to being able to more readily experience and work with. Are either of you experiencing any of this right away, right now?
I kind of feel like that's my normal state. But yeah, my dreams have been like, very intense lately and very full. And even if I don't remember them, I know there's like major things happening in my dream state. Yeah, very prophetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been really working with like the subtle energies. That's been a huge practice for me. Um, yeah, since I've been doing the Kundalini dance work for the last 15 years, like I realized when I first started doing that work that my third eye was so open that it was like almost painful. And so I've had to learn not to shut it down, but to kind of like focus it more because it would almost be like a blasting of energy and it would be very um, exhausting, I think is one of the words. Just to be able to feel things like that and to perceive things in that way and to be able to go into altered states very easily. It's like, grounding and coming into my body and like learning how to work with that energy, like even in meditation and things like that, instead of, just like a refinement of like a vibrational energy for me. And so, yeah, I've been it's such a powerful gateway because it's this connection to beyond the beyond, the unseen, the like what's underneath, what's in the inner world. It's a place that feels very comfortable for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and remember, that this activation is happening in Sagittarius. So you've got this heightened sense of being able to perceive into these higher spiritual dimensions and find those truths and bring them back here.
Yes, right, exactly. And I mean, I have Magdalene, Yeshua, Neptune, and Persephone all in Sagittarius.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Huge. And so this brings you back to, again, an interesting contemplation about what is the Magdalene desiring for you to perceive about, your inner Magdalene, your inner Yeshua, your inner Persephone, through that pipeline, right? That cosmic pipeline that Neptune provides for us to that unified source field.
Yeah, and for me, it's in the fifth house, and there's this like connection to creativity is so huge.
Absolutely.
How do I show up and joyous and fun and bringing that in through that way? That in some ways it kind of almost feels like lighthearted, and that to actually give myself permission that is, I don't know, and even though I know this, there's still this kind of like oh, to be honoring, it has to be more serious or something. I don't know, like sacred. And it's like when I say that, I'm like, of course that's not true. But
Right.
there's still like there's some sort of imprint around that,
Absolutely.
around, maybe that's through religion and different kinds of things that
There it is.
like that reverence is like a certain way instead of
And
like
silent.
right instead of like singing and like playing with fairies in the forest and like laughing.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And not knocking the
that's
please be
wonderful.
silent
Yeah.
sign over.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, I remember that. And I feel like
Well,
that's my way, like that's what I'm create that. So it's and just like to be creating
Yeah.
and to trust in my own creative inspiration.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how she speaks to me, is through that creative inspiration.
So I'm going to invite you to flip it over the way I did for Maureen earlier. And as you're creating, as you're dancing, whatever it is, try to perceive how is my inner Magdalene dancing and creating through me? How is my inner
Mm,
Yeshua creating and dancing through me? How is the cosmic Christ and the cosmic Sophia dancing and creating through me? Because we know that the Magdalene is an embodiment of Sophia, Yeshua is an embodiment of Christ, and so are we. And
mhm.
those cosmic energies manifest through us.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's very poignant that being on this journey and we're asking these questions and we're having this conversation and I'm moving towards my Magdalene return, as we go through these last couple of gates of this journey, as it's actually on the 22nd of December. So it's even on the Magdalene number. My Magdalene
Wow.
return, the exact degree is on the 22nd.
Wow.
And so and my Magdalene's at 8 degrees, which also like connects with Venus. Like there's just like all these different like little pieces that are
Yeah.
coming of really like what's the metamorphosis that I am going through, that I am actually getting ready to go through. Like,
Yeah.
there's a greater cycle that I've been going through, but there's like there and I've been feeling that there's like something happening and I'm just like and it's interesting because we're in this ascent journey, but there's a part of me that feels like I'm releasing.
Yeah.
But what kind of came through for me the other day around this was like what is this journey? I'm like what the ascent journey, like what is it? And it to me it feels like an integration. An integration. So there's still the wisdom around like what maybe has been in the way and maybe those wounded places is still there, but it's like integrating them in to like what is that now, that higher gift that's coming through integration.
And that's the Gemini goddess journey. It's integration. We said
Yeah.
integrating the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain, integrating with our multi-dimensional self,
mm,
integrating the light within us with the shadow within us. It is absolutely integration. And that is the Gemini goddess journey.
Mm, amazing. Yeah, I'm really feeling it. I'm feeling there's like a deep alchemy that's happening.
Yes. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was spectacular. Absolutely
mm.
spectacular. How about you, Maureen?
This is a tough one for me, this gate. I understood quite a while ago that the voice throat chakra and the third eye chakra um, were closed to me. I did it myself because um, of past lives. Uh, I think I did it for safety. I got into a lot of trouble because I had an open third eye and I had a voice that I used, and that wasn't accepted in a lot of our ancient history. Um, So I shut it down. And I said, I'll come back, but I'm coming back with a few precautions in place, and speaking in third eye, that was the big deal for me. So when I always get to this gate, I'm doing better with the throat, but this gate still is difficult. And I've got to the point where I just want to receive. And I maybe not, I'm not prophetic through the third eye. Maybe I am not psychic or clairvoyant or whatever, but I can receive. That's what I'm working with now, is that is open to receive. And that's a really hard thing for me. And there's got to be a lot of fear there that I'm working through from the past, because I'm certainly not afraid of it now. I've always been fearful of torture. And I've thought that is the strangest thing for a person in our world to be afraid of, in our countries where it's just not an issue for citizens here. I'm not in any situation where I'm going to be tortured, but yet I am deathly afraid of it. So I think that's a past life fear that needs to be worked through. And probably all three of us have had those experiences, and we've worked through them to different degrees. So I'm just a little behind on this. I still have fear.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for just speaking to that, because there's a piece that needs to come in for you to remind yourself of. 2 days after this gate activation, and we're just getting ready to look at all the aspects that are going on, which we dive into during your personal session. But 2 days after this gate activation, you had that Saturn opposition activation in Aquarius. The ability to perceive the big picture, the ability to perceive other realms, and your Magdalene return.
Yeah.
And so it feels like that this is another full circle moment being offered to you, where you can possibly, through these activations at this gate, finally have closure on those fears, so that you can allow yourself to fully access your third eye chakra again.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Okay. So
yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Maureen. That's really powerful. And I think a lot of people need to be aware how these past life experiences can create fears in our current life. Of course, we call them in Sanskrit samsaras. These are samsaras that we bring in with us.
Yes.
So let's look at these activations, and keep in mind, for you specifically, Maureen, which we'll dive into, how they could be providing an opportunity for you to bring closure to that. So the first thing is, remember what I said on one of the very first slides, that Moon Venus activation was right there within, what did I say, a minute, within a minute of this South node, and opposite the North node on this path of the quest mate. Then we have Mars, Mercury, and Sun together with Medusa in Libra. Medusa, what are those patriarchal fears that paralyze you? Right? That the sacred masculine and the sun can help to fuel you in bringing into balance, so that they're no longer paralyzing you. Then we have Yeshua, and I don't know why that says Pisces. It should say Cancer if it's an opposition. I'm gonna have to fix that opposite Capricorn. We'll see it on the next slide. But Pluto also creating a square to Eris and an inconjunct to Isis. And then we've got Uranus opposition to the Magdalene on that path of intensity, and the Magdalene being inconjunct Persephone, and Jupiter retrograde inconjunct Demeter. And then we've got this chain of sextiles going on down here with Pallas Athena, Chiron, Osiris, and Black Moon Lilith. So we're going to see what they look like here. But the main thing I wanted to point out to you is look at how many oppositions, 1, 2, 3 oppositions, and how many inconjuncts, 1, 2, 3 inconjuncts happening at this gate activation. So remember, these oppositions, they're calibrating us. And what are they calibrating us to? The ability to be this and that. So this is an expansion process because we've been programmed to be either this or that. And when we're this or that, we're shutting down aspects of ourselves. The this and that is bringing in a unification that is expanding us. So these oppositions are calibrating us and fine-tuning us to that. So let's see it here on the chart. So yeah, I don't know why I put Pisces. I'll correct that, but there's Yeshua and that opposition to Pluto. And then the Pluto square to Eris and the Pluto inconjunct to Isis. Here's the gate activation up here. Now you won't see the south node marked on here, but we know that wherever the north node is, the south node is exactly across the sky. And you see this is at 2 degrees 34 minutes. And the north node is at 2 degrees 35 minutes. This is huge that this is conjunct the south node within 1 degree. So what are those old samsaras that are holding you back from the truth of who you are? That it is now time for you to let go of so that you can continue your evolutionary expansion. And a lot of that has to do with belief systems, limiting beliefs. Because whenever we experience something in a negative way, we create a limiting belief around it. Okay. The limiting belief is if my third eye is open, I'm not going to be safe. I'm going to be tortured. But we know that that was only an experience you had at a particular moment in time, that the truth is that if your third eye is open, all of these fabulous things that you have access to, and you don't have to experience torture. The experience was an isolated event. Doesn't mean that every time your third eye is open, you're going to be tortured, right?
Right.
So this is what they look like. And here's that string of sextiles going on down here between these luminary bodies. And what's interesting is 3 out of the 4 of them are retrograde. And they're significant because they're connected to Chiron. And Chiron, as the cosmic shaman, shows us where we have access to shamanic medicine. So we'll see that on the next slide. But what I want to point out to you is that full moon that's coming up in 2 days. That full moon at 27 degrees of Aries is very close to where Eris is in the sky for this activation. And so by default, these aspects here, all connected to Pluto in that 24 degrees point, which I spent so much time on, are going to have a lot of illumination by this full moon around. So that's something to look forward to see. How is your transformation and the is being illuminated to you through Eris Isis, and Yeshua. And then here's the shamanic medicine piece. We have access to the Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Pisces shamanic medicine. So remember that through this activation, this window, this 1 month window, you can keep coming back to this slide and tapping into this medicine to help you more fully integrate what's going on here at this third eye. So this is the overall dance for the entire year. We know that we're coming up to December where we'll have that third and final square between Saturn and Uranus. So that's still a couple months away. And then these are the vision quest opportunities that you can allow yourself to dive into, right? Discern how are the old belief systems being fine-tuned at this time in your evolution by the spiritual truths that the moon and Venus are giving you access to through this gate of perception. And you can discern how Yeshua, Eris, and Isis are being transformed and or being reborn within you. You can, take these contemplative queries and tweak them to what might feel more pertinent to you, but these are just ideas that you can dive into. So here we are towards the end here, and I know we've gone over today, but it was such juicy conversation, and I really was looking for that more, that deeper level of engagement, and I just loved it. I hope the two of you did too. So our next support group is going to be on October 23, but I'd like to, if it's convenient for both of you, push it up an hour to 3, because I'm going to be doing a horse meditation that morning, and it's out of town, and I don't know that I can be back by 2. So I just wanted to give me some space so that I don't have to get a speeding ticket. Does that work for both of you?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 23rd at, okay, so that's 12 p.m. my time. Right,
Yes.
okay.
So just bumping it forward an hour, and I hope it doesn't bump into anything you've already scheduled. And
Yeah,
remember, these are just an hour long, so.
Okay. I do have something at 12, but I might be able to just, to still figure that out.
Okay. All right. And so here are the November classes. We'll be doing the 7th gate on November 8th. And we'll be looking at the sacred masculine, leaving the underworld on November 13th. And so here we are, the opportunity for any final questions, the opportunity for any final ahas that would like to be voiced and heard.
And October 29th is the maximum elongation of Venus.
Thank you.
So that feels like that's really powerful. And also I work really deeply with the Wheel of the Year and the cross quarter days, and lunar Samhain is on the new moon, which is on the 4th of November. And then solar Samhain, which is aligned with 15 degrees Scorpio, I think is on the 6th or 7th, depending on where your time zone is. But it's the 6th here, like in the evening, just to keep those in perspective too. Because I always feel those, for me, I feel it much stronger than on the 30th, 31st. Mostly, I think because of Halloween kind of seems to supersede all of that. And not that there isn't that, the veils are thin and the connection to the ancients and all of that, but like for ceremony, I always I really appreciate it that later, and it's deeper into that Scorpio, and that like midpoint in the Scorpio season feels so powerful.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing those dates with us. I appreciate it. And thanks for speaking to the Venus maximum elongation. And so for people that are listening, maximum elongations for a luminary body is it's like a rubber band effect. The furthest point out that it reaches from the star of our solar system, which is the sun. So do you have a degree on that with you, by the way, since you mentioned it?
I was just looking at it. Where did that thing go? It was 23 degrees, 20 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. And we learned, Maureen, you may remember in the introduction to the cosmic messenger class that I did, that with the Mercury maximum elongations, that it's never more than 17 to 28 degrees, I think, at its furthest point from the sun. So that's what the maximum elongation is all about, the furthest point from the sun that the luminary body reaches.
Yeah, and does it feel in the sky that it's like the brightest that luminary body looks, or does that play a effect? I've heard that before. I don't know. I'm just curious what your perspective on that was.
I haven't really tapped into that.
I'm going to check it out when it happens. So
I'm sure Kaylin Castell could answer that question for us. I haven't really paid a lot of attention to maximum elongations, and really it's only come into my awareness as an event, because in the Mercury synodic cycle there are 4 key events, and 2 of them have to do with maximum elongation. The other 2 have to do with conjunctions with the sun, the superior conjunction and the inferior conjunction. So that's the only reason why recently the concept of maximum elongation has even just kind of raised itself within my awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So I do appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Do you know, Maureen? Because I know you've done a lot of work with Kaylin.
No, I've not paid attention to elongations other than, I know the date sometimes not. There's out of bounds too, and I'm not sure what that means, but sometimes that's the case with Venus. I don't know what that means. All of them have an out of bounds.
Yeah, my head starts to, like my brain starts to go into snow. Remember back in the 60s, you had 3 basic channels, and when you would move the knob, when you hit a channel that wasn't active, you get snow.
Lots of it, and static.
Yeah, that's what happens to my brain when it starts to shut down. It's like snow.
Yeah. Snow and static, yes.
I've always related that to the autism, that if I start to get like too overwhelmed, that my brain shuts down. And because those are astrological terms that I don't have a comfort zone with, it creates too much of a stretch for me, and my brain starts to shut down.
I always call that with myself the point of diminishing returns.
So maybe
that's what I learned in accounting.
Maybe
it's diminishing
a survival event.
Yeah.
All right, my dears, this has been a fabulous class. Thank you so much. I will take this opportunity to remind you, Maureen, that we're doing our Sacred Masculine class on Thursday.
Yes, I've got it down.
All right.
Yeah.
So have a great week, because this Saturday is our group session.
Already.
Yep.
Okay.
And now listen, I'm flexible. So if you want to push it out a Saturday, just to give you more integration time after this class, I'm more than happy to do that. You tell me if you want to go ahead and do it on the 23rd when we would normally have it, or if you want to push it out a week to the 30th.
Okay. Yeah, I think I would.
Yeah, I'm open to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then let's do that. And I'll
Okay.
update the slide for that too. That
Thank
gives you
you.
more space to integrate everything that we've discussed.
And then we
I-
would want to have our personal sessions the week of November 1st because we have the
Yes.
next one on the 8th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might even book mine now too, so that I know that I've done it for
Yeah,
that week.
That would
Okay.
be great. That would be
Okay.
great. Go ahead and send me a text to get those booked. That
Okay.
way we can do the November 8th class on time.
Perfect.
Okay.
And listen, there's absolutely no judgment. I learned to become flexible, which is really important when you have Cancer on your ascendant in the first house and your sun in Capricorn. You gotta go with the flow.
Yep.
Too bad it's taken me so late in my life to figure out how to do that. That's the kindest way, the gentlest way I can nurture myself is how can I allow myself to be more in the flow?
Yes.
Yes.
The
For sure.
dance. Beautiful.
All right, you gorgeous Gaias. I will see you soon. Thank you for all of
Okay.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.